I am Vactor, and my favorite Star Wars TV show is Andor. I am joined by my good friend Super Tim. How are you doing today, Tim?
Great. My favorite Star Wars TV show is The Mandalorian.
Nice, nice. And we are talking Star Wars television because The Acolyte is no more. It will not be picked up for a season two. There will not be seasons three, four, and five, like Leslie Headland had talked about and kind
How
of said she
sad.
was in the planning stages of. So we're only going to get one season, a la Obi-Wan, maybe Book of Boba Fett. This is interesting to me because I wonder what Disney's plan is for Star Wars television overall by not renewing this show. Where, I would love to be a fly on the wallpaper of what is going on here, what was their decision making process, and then what are they moving forward? Like, okay, we're going to push this as the new form of Disney TV, because you and I are both Marvel fans. We're both MCU fans, and we know with Daredevil Born Again, they're completely redoing. They scrapped it after they had already shot some stuff, and they said, "All right, let's go back to the drawing board. Let's make this like a real TV show. Let's have a showrunner. Let's have the way that we would traditionally do a television show, and not like we used to do it, where it was like, all right, we'll just film stuff, and then they can improvise and make it a movie, and then we'll cut it up into little pieces." So do you have the same anxiety that I do for the future of Star Wars television, or do you think it's still on the rails, it's still on track? This might have just been a bump in the road.
I am a little concerned about Star Wars television after this because you and I are both fans of the medium of television, and we've watched television, our whole lives. And the thing about television is it's a medium that can grow year after year, and I think that can and this is goes back to when Firefly was canceled. That story was cut short, and I kind of feel the same thing with the Acolyte. I had those a lot of those same feelings when I saw that the Acolyte was canceled as I did when Firefly was canceled, when Terminator: The Sarah Connor Chronicles got canceled. I had all those same feelings and emotions that I felt like that. Whoa, I'm now not going to get to see this story. And
Right.
it's funny you mentioned Obi-Wan and Book of Boba Fett. I always imagined that Obi-Wan Kenobi and Book of Boba Fett, very much like you said with Marvel, WandaVision, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Miss Marvel, those always felt like that they were always designed to be one season shows. Like
Hmm.
they were a limited series. It was in the DNA of those things that okay, we're coming back, we're doing this thing, but it's like with Book of Boba Fett, it's leading towards Mandalorian season 3. With Obi-Wan, it's kind of wrapping up this prequel journey of Obi-Wan Kenobi with Ewan McGregor. With Falcon and the Winter Soldier, it's a transition from Avengers Endgame into the next Captain America movie. WandaVision transition from Avengers Endgame to Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And that's what those series felt like. And that's fine. That's what they were intended to do. But with the Acolyte, I felt like we were kind of given a new kind of story, a new ground. And I've mentioned on this show multiple times. I'm a huge fan of the High Republic, and I was really excited to see that on the big screen. And I was excited to see more because going into it, Leslie Headland said, "Yeah, we're having Vernestra Rowe in this show, but in season 2, we're going to have different High Republic characters," and that excited me. And now that that's not happening, I feel like this show and the potential it has is a little cut short.
Yeah. And this was the sense that I got, and we talked about this on our review. If you're interested, we reviewed every single episode of The Acolyte. We've got a playlist, we've got all the episodes in our back catalog. But we talked about how the ending of the show is a cliffhanger. The ending of the season, I should say, is a cliffhanger. So I said at the time, man, if they don't do a season two, this is going to be very disappointing the way that they left this. Just like Ahsoka, when I got to the end of that and I didn't know there was going to be a season 2, I said, okay, there's all these things left dangling. How are those things going to get resolved? And this doesn't feel like a complete story to me. Same exact thing with the Acolyte, but now that I know that there's not going to be a season 2, I can for sure say, okay, I am disappointed in season 1 because there were all these pops of potential, and oh man, look at the martial arts, look at this new thing in Star Wars, look at the witches, look at the dark magic, look at all these things. And
A story without Skywalkers.
yes, and people have been clamoring for that. To me, I've been hearing all these
Mm-hmm.
people say, hey, why can't we focus on a different family? The galaxy is so big. If you're focusing on just one lineage, one line, then it gets kind of boring. And that was the old canon, the old legend stuff. It was, hey, there's all these stories that are told that don't involve Skywalker. Now there was a lot of stuff with the Skywalkers in the legend stuff as well, but my point is it made the galaxy feel bigger, that we had this large expansive timeline, that we have this galaxy of planets that we have never been to and we're visiting all the time. This brought us to new planets. This gave us new characters. I wish it was more High Republic and not, all right, we're at the tail end of the High Republic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Getting into Phantom Menace territory. Like it's butting heads with the prequels, so much so that if you told me this was in the prequel era, I wouldn't say, oh, yeah, you're wrong. Like, no, this looks like the prequels. This feels like the prequels. The High Republic, they had these little sprinkles like the gold on top, the gold accents on top of the Jedi Temple and
Mm-hmm.
the robes, the white robes. But for the most part, it didn't feel too much different than the prequels to me. And I wanted it to be, all right, there is no doubt this is a High Republic show. You and I talked
Sure.
about that
Yeah.
offline. Like the stuff that we're getting in the High Republic comics, the stuff we're getting in the High Republic novels, you
Mm-hmm.
are not going to mistake those time periods for the prequels. There are Jedi powers. There's the way that the Force is used that are not in the prequels, right? So I really wish they would do like a show set in the middle of the High Republic instead of at the end of it. And maybe that's
Mm-hmm.
where, the Dawn of the Jedi that we're getting with James Mangold. I'm really excited about that because it's the first, the beginnings of the Jedi. And that's a time period that I'm really excited about. But
Yeah.
for the Acolyte, it's like, what was the point of this story? I I feel like because of the way it was told, the way that each episode got cut short, like it was like, I think there was more we're supposed to get. It felt like you're cutting a piece off. That ended up being now that we know that there's not going to be a
That's the
season 2.
legacy of the show now.
Yeah, this whole show, it feels like, okay, we got chopped off at the end there, and you're never going to get to find out what happens with the rest of that stuff. There was a joke on Twitter. Somebody posted that the Yoda, the back of his head, we're never going to get to find out who this was, which I just laughed at. But I'm
Yeah.
interested to hear your thoughts about this season. Do you feel like it was a complete story? Do you feel satisfied with what we got in season 1, or did you want it to continue? Did you want the last shot we see with Chimera and Osha? Did you want to see, hey, what's the next thing that right after that? Where do they go? What do they
Right.
do?
Right. I mean, obviously, as far as that goes, no, I was not satisfied. I wanted more because obviously we've got Granddaddy Plagueis
Yes,
lurking in the
it's a,
background,
a huge
and
one.
this is the first like canon. Aside from Revenge of the Sith, canon appearance of Darth Plagueis. I mean, there's a novel that's really good that he's in and he features very prominently, but that's kind of Legends material, and they're kind of dipping into Legends a little bit with this. I would imagine that in the season 2, Chimera would have definitely introduced Osha to Plagueis, and that new dynamic between, it's kind of like a Palpatine Dooku and Ventress dynamic from the
Right,
Clone
right.
Wars, and I would have liked to see that explored.
Yeah.
Obviously, the the backstory with Vernestra and Chimere.
Yep.
I wanted to see more of, because
Yes.
there was a reason why when Vernestra was on the planet and Chimere sensed her, and he's like, nope, I'm out of here, like, later, bye. uh,
Yeah. Right.
and like, I wanted to know like what the relationship between
Yes.
those two characters were, what like what has led Vernestra to this place that we see her in. And obviously, we've got a novel coming out, and we'll talk more about those, coming out in next May, called Acolyte Wayseeker, and talking about her place, and it takes place like, I want to say like a couple years before the Acolyte, and Indara is going to be in it, and all this great stuff. And so we're going to get some more of that. But I still would have liked to see this fleshed out, like what the political dynamic. I mean, the scene with Senator Raincourt. Um, I wanted to see that kind of dynamic between the
Man, I
Senate
wanted
and the
that the whole
Jedi.
show to be that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there were so many like hanging elements that I was looking forward to a season two exploring, and I do not feel that the Acolyte itself was a complete story. And yes, the show's called The Acolyte, and we did get to see Osha become the titular acolyte at the end. Acolyte at the end, but but as you and I have seen with shows that we've liked and that have gone, into, second seasons, third seasons, and 7 seasons, sometimes 10 to 15 seasons. Like, those shows progress beyond what the original story conceit was in the beginning, and I
Right.
would have liked to see that explored. And the
Right.
fact that we're not going to, it's a little disheartening.
I can't think of a show that to me that's like, all right, the last season and the first season are very similar. Like every show that I can think of, you brought up a great example of Smallville off mic. This first season of Smallville and then the 10th season of Smallville, there's so many differences between where the characters are, how the characters have matured, the locations, the area. Hey,
Like the universe. I mean, we've got
right,
a mini DC universe by the
right,
end of that show.
right.
You look at Smallville season 1, and it's all about, Clark Kent learning to deal with his powers as a high schooler, and that lasted for a couple seasons. But then they moved to Metropolis, and then we have like a mini Justice League, a mini DC universe on the cusp of which, thankfully Brian Q. Miller picked up in a comic, and we got some wonderful things there. Uh, if you're watching, Brian Q. Miller, I love you. For that comic, because it delivered on something. And if that show or any other show like The Office, like that show, like if we talk, because the narrative around season 1 is, oh, it was awful, the numbers weren't there. And you know what, The Office, the numbers weren't there. It was a mid-season show. It had like 5 episodes, six episodes, and
That's right.
it could have been canceled,
It
but
got
fewer.
DVD.
Yeah, DVD, iTunes, these things saved the show and allowed it to
Mm-hmm.
go on to 9 seasons, and now it's the juggernaut that it is again, thanks to Netflix. And
Seinfeld was the same way. That's a show that I always bring up. The first season, it was not a success, and it is not the same show in the first season as
sure,
what it would become and evolve into. And it is considered one of the greatest comedies of all time. It was, if you had judged it off that first season, you would have cut it, would have never gotten all of these classic moments, all these classic things. And I'm
hmm
not saying that The Acolyte would have been one of the greatest shows of all time, but in this in this streaming era that we're in, I feel like shows, they just, a lot of them, especially with Disney Plus shows, they're just not getting the full um,
the
life
television
that they would
experience.
have. Yeah, the television experience that we got with cable, we're not getting that with streaming, and that's from top to bottom. The binge model, releasing it all at once. only doing 8 episodes, not doing another season. Like the way that they've kind of been shifting all these shows on Disney Plus, from Andor to Mandalorian to Ahsoka, Book of Boba Fett, all of these things, it feels like they're almost like throwing darts against the wall and being like, okay, what's going to stick here? There's no uniformity. There's no, and I thought we were getting that with Mandalorian going into Book of Boba Fett. And then when Ahsoka was announced, I was like, oh, this is all the Dave Filoni, John Favreau. Like
And
we're
I think we're
keeping
still
it
getting that to an extent because we've
with the
got Mandalorian.
movie.
Yeah, with the
Right.
Mandalorian and Grogu, with the
Right.
the New Republic culmination movie. I think we're still getting that to an
Yes.
extent, but I think that's what it's limited to. But
Right.
yeah,
Well,
definitely.
that's my point is it's not all of Star Wars television is not in the same place. It's like, all right, Andor's over here, Mando's over here, Book of Boba Fett's over here, and it's like
And
it's
Acolyte's way
wildly,
over here.
yeah, it's wildly inconsistent. Versus, I feel like Star Wars, like I wish they would give us some consistency of these
Hmm.
shows in terms of quality, in terms of the look, like what we're going to get from it. Because again, the reason why Andor is my favorite show, not only the story, not only the storytelling, not only the acting, but the cinematography, the way it was shot, the way it looks like a film, and it just looks like prestige television. And
Hmm.
the other shows don't, especially Book of Boba Fett. Like it just feels like it was like you could have shot it on your iPhone. Like it doesn't feel, and that's no, shade to the iPhone. You could do some great stuff on an iPhone today, but just in terms of quality, you're not going to beat a cinema camera. Like you're not going to beat the way that a film is shot today. It looks better than if you're just going to shoot something on you as, let's say, as a novice, not as a professional. That's what I mean by like the uniformity of it. And I'm hoping that the Mando and Grogu movie is great, and hopefully they can wrap up that show in general, Mando and this whole Filoni verse that they're doing.
Hmm.
Hopefully that can go well. But look at Skeleton Crew. Like that looks completely different. That looks like an Amblin Steven Spielberg
Yeah,
80s movie. And there's a part of me that's like, yes, I like experimentation. I like trying new stuff, but it comes to a point where if I'm not really satisfied with each new show, okay, well, why are you trying all these things when it's not working? Like there's so many things that are not hitting the mark, you're not hitting the bullseye with. I can't say Book of Boba Fett was 5 out of 5. I can't say Ahsoka was five
the
out of five. I
Mandalorian
can't.
episodes of Book of Boba Fett were 5 out of
Yes,
5.
yes. I can't say Acolyte is 5 out of 5. And a lot of comments, oh, you're a Disney shill. You love the show. And it's like, I can show you every single review where I told you the good and the bad, the things I liked, the things I didn't like. But I just, I wish we could get something consistent as far as quality and storytelling. Because that's at the end of the
Right.
day, it's storytelling. These are television is a medium for storytelling, and cutting this off at season one, I felt like, and I gave this analogy to our friend Schaff, who was on those reviews. It felt to me like you're reading a book and you get to the end of chapter one, and then somebody says, all right, let me take the rest of those pages out. Let me pull the rest of the story. And you're like, wait a minute, there was more story to be told. Even
Yeah,
if you thought that first chapter was great and you thought that first chapter told a complete story, you still want to know what the rest of the book was. It's just
exactly.
that's what it feels like with Acolyte. It feels like there was more story to be told, and that's the shame to me of this is I wish we just would have gotten a complete thought from Leslie Headland and then judge it at the end. Okay, you didn't like it. Some seasons worked, some seasons didn't work, but at least let it play out. Like, don't cut it off before it was ending. And you made a great point about like Obi-Wan felt like, hey, they set out to tell a story and they told it. Even though at the end of Obi-Wan, there was all these little rumors about, oh, that little Qui-Gon thing. maybe there's going to be another
But even
season.
then, even that thing, like you could here I am, Obi-Wan, like I've been here, and like I'm gonna begin your other training, and you could infer where Obi-Wan goes from there in A New Hope, and it feels complete. Or it's this, we have all these new characters that we've been introduced to, and yeah, we a lot of them died, but we still have Renestra, we still have they can introduce new characters, and they gave us some really good characters.
Well,
Soul, we had Jecki, we had
yes.
Yord, we had all these characters, um, and I feel like that Osha's journey's not complete. I don't think
Yeah,
May's
that
journey's complete.
right. That was yeah,
Um,
and I think a lot of people are leaving May out of this. She got mind wiped and she's just there. Like what's going to happen with May? Like what I felt like they just tossed her aside. We're never going to figure out okay, what was the point of saying they were one person and they were split up? We're never going to find out like what was the reason
and I
behind
think a
that.
season two could have explored that.
Yes. Could
Yeah,
have explored that. Oh, go ahead.
and here's another thing is you have what people are calling and season one was good. It wasn't great, it wasn't the best thing ever, but it was still good. And but the narrative around it is that it wasn't good. And this and then you have Disney like, okay, we're canceling it, done. And that puts pressure on creatives to then like, well, what's going to happen if my show or my limited series or my series that I'm starting has problems, and then what, I'm going to get canceled, and then I have no work, and I know no story
Right.
more to tell. It puts
Right.
more pressure on these directors and all these writers,
Yeah.
because like there's no way to tell if a show or any story is going to land with people. And you're rolling the dice, and now you're rolling the dice even more, because now with streaming there's more pressure to, if you're not a Stranger Things, a Mandalorian, or
Game of
Game
Thrones.
of Thrones, then you're not going. Then you're just like, there's no point in even trying. If you're not reinventing the wheel, then what's the point? Like,
Yeah.
I mean,
I
yeah, it's
think
just, I really feel bad for all these creatives who are in the streaming landscape and are now pressured to deliver on the best thing ever, or you're gonna get canceled.
right. I think streaming is like a gift and a curse. It's so
Mm-hmm.
convenient, right? Like there's, and I'm a huge fan of time shifting stuff, like watching stuff when you want to watch it, and not
Sure.
necessarily being live at okay 8 o'clock at this time. You have to be there, but the the cons of streaming I think are starting to show because of the business models of these streaming platforms, whether it be Netflix, Apple TV Plus, Disney Plus. We're seeing that those seem to be driving the creative decisions more so than actually the stories and what the audience is reacting to of those stories. You look at Lost, for example, like the way that Lost kind of changed. Look at Nikki and Paolo. They reacted to kind of the fans, and they were able to do that. They weren't cut off as soon as the Nikki and Paolo episode came out. They weren't canceled, right? So with streaming, it's like I don't know if this is the best thing for us as television fans, and how long is streaming going to be around, because this is relatively new, and you think about the history of television. Streaming is relatively new. How long is this format going to stick
It's a
around?
blip, really, when
Yeah.
you compare it to the history of television, which has its roots in the 30s and the 40s.
Right.
And you look at that vast history of television, streaming is just like this little thing right
Right.
here.
I really
And
feel like oh, go ahead.
no, I can't remember what I was going to say
I
now.
was I was gonna say I really feel like Disney is trying for another Mandalorian. That was such a huge hit. As soon as Mandalorian came out and Grogu, that was everywhere. Everybody wanted a doll, a Grogu doll. Everybody loved Baby Yoda. That was a viral hit, kind of like Ted Lasso was for Apple TV Plus. And I feel like they haven't had another one of those. Definitely not with Star Wars. I don't really watch a lot of their other original content, but I feel like Disney is struggling for the identity of what is Disney Plus, right?
Right.
Like why do we have this? How do we use this?
Well,
And I
and
think
you
a lot of
look
that.
and you
Okay,
look at what Disney Plus was at the beginning,
right.
and you had all the you didn't just have your Marvel and your Star Wars and your Lucasfilm and your Pixar. You had like all these different other original content that was really good. There was a show about a girls basketball team called Big Shot. Um,
I think I remember seeing that,
and
the
it was
a
really
poster for it.
good. It was really good, and I like my brother told me about it, and I'm like, okay, I'll give it a watch. And I love the first season. They released the second season all at once, and that's a ding 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 red flag for me.
Hmm.
When
Right,
they release a season all at once, you're like,
right.
okay. When they typically do it weekly, you're like, okay, what's going on here?
Yep.
And it was really good, and they got canceled. And you have the Mighty Ducks show, which the first season was really good, but then Emilio Estevez had problems with COVID stuff, so he left the show. And then that second season was atrocious. I didn't even finish it. But you look at what Disney Plus was, and and then you look at it now. It's like they're so focused on their branded content now, and it just what is the future of streaming? What is the future of Disney Plus? I mean, even Netflix. You only have like a handful of things that have really caught the public's attention. You have your House of Cards, your Stranger Things, your Cobra Kai that is they're dividing the season up to you know spread out
Hmm.
this brand and this story. And but you look at their legacy of streaming content, it's just, well, we bring the show in, we cancel it, and you've canceled everything, that to the point where a new show comes on Netflix, you're like, well, is it going to get canceled?
Yeah. Why should I
And
watch this?
exactly, why should I watch this?
Yeah.
And that's kind of my concern with Star Wars television with this is, like we got the Skeleton Crew coming out in a couple months in December, and will people want to watch it? And you had Andor, which was going to be a 5-season thing, and now is only 2 seasons.
Yeah.
You have Acolyte, that was canceled. You had the Lando show that's dead in the water.
Right.
Uh, and you
And I
have all
feel
these
like
things,
we
and it's
should be
just
going into these shows knowing they are okay. Andor is going to be a multi-season show. Skeleton Crew, I don't know. Is that supposed to be just one season? Is that supposed to be like, if
like
it's popular, are they going to get more?
is it just an event series? They're not really being clear on it.
Yeah.
One of my favorite shows right now that's on streaming, The Chosen, is a show about Jesus, and in the description it says this is a multi-season show. And like it tells you, okay, this is what I know I'm going to be in for. I'm going to be in for something that's going to be multiple
Yes.
seasons. I don't know how
Sets your
many seasons.
expectation.
Yeah, exactly. Like I know what I'm in for. I know the
Right.
the ride you know that I'm going to be strapping myself in
Mm-hmm.
for. But
Right.
if I go into a show like The Acolyte, where I don't know, you have Leslie Heslin talking about, oh, I've got a plan for a season 2, and when she said that, this was before, like months before season 1 came out, and I'm just like, okay, good, that means we're getting a season 2 because she
Yes.
said it.
Yes. Yep.
Because she said it. So
And
obviously, why wouldn't there be a season 2?
this was
Um,
so crazy because we just had D23. They were announcing stuff like Acolyte related stuff. We were wondering if we were going to get an announcement for season 2, but they seemed last week, they seemed confident. This week, oh, we're done. Like,
Yeah, exactly. And you had, just weeks prior at San Diego Comic-Con, you had all these different Acolyte content. You had an Acolyte reference guide. You had an Acolyte art book, which features and a forward by Rebecca Henderson, who plays Renestra. You have all these Acolyte novels. You have a Jackie and Yord novel. You, like I mentioned, the Vernestra novel. We have Kelnaka one shot comic that's coming out next month. Next year, Kelnaka is going to feature really heavily in the main High Republic title for Marvel Star Wars comics, and so they're putting all this stuff from the Acolyte into these mediums, and then a few weeks later, like, nope, it's canceled.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And
And it
that
just didn't make sense because
all of
why
that
put all this money and these resources and this effort and this creative talent to tell these acolyte centric stories? And obviously, Justina Ireland's Vernestra book is, would obviously dovetail not only into where her journey was in season one, but maybe going into season two. I think Leslie Headland said that Vernestra was done after season one, but I would have liked to see like where her place is in the galaxy after season one. And
right.
now we're not going to get that, and this novel is basically going to be the last of Vernestra that we get, and that's
Yeah.
unfortunate.
And all of those things you mentioned, those had to be greenlit. Those had to be put into production months ahead of time,
Months ahead,
maybe a year ahead of time.
because the author has to pitch the
Right.
book and is like, well, I want to tell this acolyte story. And Justina Ireland, who has written Vernestra in every book so far, is like, I want to tell that, like you're doing this story about Vernestra. That sounds interesting to me. I want to see how she gets there. And so, like, the author's got to outline, they've got to figure out where they want the character to go. Sorry to cut you off, but and like comics, they have to have the art for this new cover that they debuted at San Diego Comic-Con that I just read about today in a book, and to promote this new title that's going to feature Kalnaka. And it just feels odd to me. And Manny Jacinto had a thing at D23 last week, where he seemed pretty enthusiastic about
Yes. Mm-hmm.
about a season two. Acolyte was very heavy at D23. They had all the different costumes and props and really cool stuff there, and it just seems odd to put all that money and all that manpower to get that stuff there, to just cancel it.
Yeah.
It just
That
seems odd to me.
to me, that says they were confident in it. They put all those things into production. I know they didn't create a Lego set, but everything you just named, why would they put all of those things into production if they weren't confident and they didn't know if there was going to be a season two? I feel like they were confident in the show. They greenlit it, they gave it a big budget, and they were promoting it. And then at some point it shifted and they were like, oh, we better pivot away. Like I said, I wish I was a fly on the wall to hear the
Right.
conversations, but
And they promoted it well because
yes,
they had all these trailers, these commercials that I was seeing. They had the merchandise. Yes, they didn't have a Lego set, and I'll just point out that not every Star Wars series and project has had a Lego set. Tales of the Jedi didn't get one. Tales of the Empire didn't get one. Um, and Star Wars Visions didn't get one. But maybe they just didn't feel that any of the ships or any of the stuff that was in the Acolyte fit with the Lego set. I mean, with the
right,
Skeleton Crew, you have a ship at the center of it,
right.
but we had a ship that was called the Kantaros that that I only knew about because I looked it up on Wikipedia. Uh, um, and but that wasn't really central. Like, they didn't have a central ship. They didn't have a
Right.
central, piece
I
of.
don't think they ever said the name out loud
Right. No, they didn't.
in the
But they
show.
didn't. They didn't have a central location or fight. And I think if they 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 did that, um, I mean, yeah, they still promoted it very well. They had a sneak peek at the screenings of the Phantom Menace. I didn't get it, but other people did. Other
Yes.
people saw it. I talked to you, and I talked to other people who saw the footage, and it got them excited about the Acolyte, so it worked. And but for some reason, they dropped, like, the viewers dropped off after that initial episode. I don't know why, but
Yeah.
but the thing is, a lot of people aren't watching these shows immediately. My wife, who hasn't seen a Star Wars show since Mandalorian, um, she doesn't watch these shows right away. She got a Lego set for her birthday, and so she wants to watch Ahsoka now. But, uh, but
See, my Yeah, and my
Yeah.
hesitation now is if somebody is not paying attention to all this online stuff like we do, if they're not paying attention to the conversation, if they go to the say, okay, I want to watch the Acolyte. Oh, it's only one season. Oh, I'm not even going to bother with that. Like they they're not continuing the story. It's not going to go anywhere, and they're right. Like there's some
Right.
great stuff in the Acolyte, but I can't recommend it like I could Andor because it's not a 5 out of 5. It's not like the best thing possible. And now that I know we're not getting another season and we're not going to expand that story, we're not going to get a more complete look at it. I can't recommend it to people. So
Right.
I'm really hoping this kind of changes. I'm hoping, like the Marvel stuff with the MCU, I'm hoping Disney can say, okay, we need to look at our Star Wars department. We need to get John Favreau and Dave Filoni in here, and let's have them guide all of Star Wars television.
Hmm.
Because right now, like I said, it just feels like they're throwing darts at the board and they don't know
It
what's going
feels
to
like that with
stick.
the movies too, if you think about it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Well, yeah,
uh,
there's a lot of problems there too. So
yeah,
I
because
hope,
yeah,
well,
because
I
with
just
the
hope that they can
movies,
get back on track.
yeah, I hope that they can pivot. I hope that they can, find a way to, you know, pull like because we talk about Marvel, when you because my enthusiasm for the like it's mentioned on this Comic Cooks where we talked about the Robert Downey Jr. Dr. Doom casting. My enthusiasm for the MCU it was there. But it wasn't as we're like, oh my gosh, I have to see every single movie and every single show as it was a few years ago.
Right.
Because the quality's dropped off. And, you know, um, we've got Mandalorian and Grogu, and we've got um, the new Jedi Order Rey movie. We've got the Dawn of the Jedi, but these feel like just random things that, like, well, I hope this works. It doesn't feel like there's not a new trilogy. There's not a new series. We don't know if the Skeleton Crew's gonna last more than a season. And apart from Andor season 2, that's and Ahsoka season 2, that's the only Star Wars show. And is Ahsoka season 2 gonna move past season 2 and into a season 3? We don't
Right.
know. I don't like this, because in TV in the past, we never knew if we were going to get another season. We would find out in May with the upfronts, when a new show would get released. They say, "Hey, we're getting coming back for another season. We're coming back for another season," but you knew what you were getting because the quality was consistently good with whatever given show, like Smallville or Supernatural. I've watched those shows, Thursday nights back to back. Um, and I knew the quality was there, and so I didn't mind investing. Um, but but TV at that time, if you weren't going to get picked up for another season, you still had enough time, months to kind of rewrite your last couple scripts and, like, okay, they're not going to get picked up for another season. Here's how we're going to end the show. Whereas with
Right.
streaming, it's so far, like, the production is so far in advance, and you have your season, and they don't have time if they're not picked up. They have to tell them in advance, okay, this is your last season. Be prepared to wrap it up and everything.
Right.
But with the Acolyte, they didn't have that opportunity, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah. So hopefully, like you said, they can pivot. We can get some great Star Wars show, and we got Andor season 2. We got Skeleton Crew. So we will be covering those on this show on Trust in the Force. We would love to hear your thoughts on the Acolyte, on Disney Star Wars television in general, and maybe even your thoughts on streaming versus traditional cable. All these topics I think are interesting and worth a conversation, and not just, oh, the Acolyte sucks, it's trash, it's woke. That's not an engaging conversation. That's not a great comment. So if you're going to say that, go to another channel. I'm interested in having a conversation with people and saying, hey, what did you like about this? What did you not like about it? But just coming in and saying, oh, it's trash, and then leaving, that's not constructive criticism. That's not good feedback. So leave some nice constructive criticism in the comments below. And like I said, we will be back talking all of the Star Wars television in the future for the rest of 2024 and beyond. Thank you very much for joining us, and we are always honored if you can join us.
Trust